Hello, YouTube. Hello to everyone in the chat and everyone watching on the VOD. This is your humble host, Shintigercurl, that dude in the straw hat, bringing you yet another edition of Shintigercurl Streamin. How's everybody doing? I see Hairball in the chat as always. Devil, nice to see you around. Missed you on Tuesday, but you didn't really miss much. Just talked some SCPs and stuff. But we got some stuff to talk about. Today we'll be doing my first ever deep dive into the world of the tabletop miniatures game Warmachine / Hordes. And if you like deep dank lore, then you're in for it. So pull up some popcorn. You're going to be doing some stuff. Yeah, I remember that your inventory stuff has been just an absolute bitch to you. I am so sorry you had to go through that, my friend. And we're going to talk about that, Brother Ball. We got to talk about some stuff. So if you're watching, I think you know what time it is, boys. It's time to get out your guns, lock and load, because it's time the shit. Yeah, that's right. I got a new, I made a new, transition for, shoot the shit. And I had used, Van Auger, the sniper of the Blackbeard Pirates, shooting at the stream, and someone is messaging me. I need to see this. Oh, it's just some woman I know. So that, but yeah, I decided to create a new transition, and I figured since we're shooting the shit, who's best to shoot the shit than the supersonic Van Auger? That's right. Took me a while to make that transition, but anyway, as Brother Ball mentioned, the internet is laughing at one Miss Ronda Rousey. Why? Because she thought it was a good idea to schedule an AMA to promote her new comic book, on where she took questions from Reddit. Yeah, it went about as well as you can expect. A lot of jokes about her being a Sandy Hook denier and her being basically just a crap fighter in general. So it was all just, oh, I didn't watch it myself, but T-Dub shared some of it on his Facebook, and they went in on poor Rhonda. Let me see if I could pull some up from T-Dub stuff. I'm just gonna take a small little detour here, going on to Facebook. Yes, indeedy. Okay, I see you, T-Dub. All right, let's see if we can't find the I mean, he posted it on his wall. Oh, here it is. There it is. Here's a question: which hook was more devastating for your career, Rhonda? Sandy Hook or Holly Holmes's left? Ouch. I bet she knew this was going to happen and is loving us watch ourselves work up into a shit. Never mind. Yeah. Hi, Rhonda. Would you consider Sandy Hook or being a better fighter than Amanda Nunes being the bigger denial of your career? Do you think that Angela Carini was inspired by you to cry and act like a sore loser after getting her ass beat in front of the entire world? Woo! Here's another one. I'm sorry, Rhonda, that you're getting so many questions about Sandy Hook. I have a completely different question. During your MMA career, did you require your cis opponents to be tested to make sure their bone density was of a normal range for women, or was that the only concern when you wanted to gatekeep trans women in sports? Here's a good one. I heard rumors that WWE was going to pitch an angle repackaging you as a pirate character, the descendant of a well-known swashbuckler. Supposedly, you shot this down. Did you deny it because your gimmick was going to be a Sandy Hook? And that was just a taste of the absolute wreckage that they were giving poor Rhonda. I don't even feel bad for Rhonda. Fuck Rhonda. And as Brother Paul mentions in the chat, yes, perhaps one of the greatest shoot commentators in professional wrestling, not even, and maybe in all of combat sports, is coming back to the comms table. Mauro Bernalo is returning. Yep, he will be working specifically for Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling, a wrestling federation restarted by none other than the savior of TNA wrestling himself, Scott D'Amore. Oh, there's that. Yes. The Democratic National Convention and is taking place, and my God, it is a world apart from the Republican one. So many rock stars, so much stuff going down. Yeah, as they were counting up the nomination votes, the representative of Georgia pulled out Lil Jon. I think in terms of celebrity guest stars, Lil Jon ranks a wee bit higher than old Kid Rock. The Obamas, of course, classy, class acts, totally. Crowd went nuts for them, especially Michelle. It's a shame Michelle Obama is not running in public office. She has the intelligence, the charisma, and the toughness to actually be a president. I actually picked her to be our first black woman president, but he wants to be a family person, so I'm not going to hold her to that. So there's that. Racist ass Terry Boulder is in the news as he released, some footage came out as he was promoting his shitty beer, where he was doing a bad impression of Stone Cold Steve Austin. And then he went into a racist tirade rant against Kamala Harris, mocking her Indian heritage. Then he blamed it on the beer. And then a few hours later, his biopic, which was set to star Thor himself, Chris Hemsworth, was canned. I wonder why that is. Last night's Dynamite was the Go Home Dynamite, taking place for the first time in Cardiff, Wales. Excellent show, top to bottom. We had a great little segment between DMD and CEO for their match coming up this week. Nice rematch between Timeless Tony Storm and Saraya from last year's All In at Wembley. Let's see. Dang thing doesn't want to act right. Might have to just get rid of. If you don't want to act right, I'm gonna get rid of you. Yeah, I'm just gonna get rid of you. Sorry. Yeah, DMD she carried that segment. Not saying that Mercedes is a bad on the stick. It's just DMD's got this shit down by like easily. Great little in-ring confrontation between the current American champion MJF and the hometown boy of the Billy Goat, Will Ospreay. Yep, and you can tell Cardiff was into it as they were so loud they drowned out Maxwell Jacob Friedman. Let me repeat that. They drowned out Maxwell Jacob Friedman. That's impressive. Yep, he said that too, Brother Ball. Let's see. We had an excellent Continental Classic match between Claudio Castagnoli and the Rainmaker Kazuchika Okada. They went the full 20 minutes on that shit, and I wanted another 5 minutes. But then the New Elite came out and said that Okada only agreed to wrestle for 20 minutes, not 25. This transitioned perfectly into a trios match pitting Jack Perry with his new self-made TNT title and Nicholas and Matthew Jackson versus FTR and Darby Allin. Crazy ass match. And when I say self-made, I really mean self-made. I did not know Jack Perry was into metalworking like that, and I'm sort of into metalworking myself. I don't do it, I just keep up with it, and he showed the process of him making his own TNT belt, and I gotta say, I'm impressed, Jack Perry. I'm impressed. And in the main event, well, not the main event, we had in a main segment the final confrontation between Swerve Strickland and of course the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. Very excellent segment. I could not do it justice. It's on YouTube. If this is how Bryan Danielson's going to go out, he went out on top. And speaking of, also one more thing before we get to the card officially, we got two major signees. One for AEW. We had two brothers jumping ship from one ship to the another. Jumping ship from AEW to the WWE side is Absolute Ricky Starks. Pretty Ricky, what they call him. Yep, it's been made official that will be making his debut soon in the old Black and Gold brand. So he'll be joining the likes of All Ego, Ethan Page, and of course the local hero Joe Hendry. So good for him. And from the WWE to the AEW side, it has been confirmed as of today. Ricochet has signed with AEW and it is believed that he will be making his debut probably at Wembley. Oh yeah, there's that. Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up. I'm always down for some Disco Inferno cooking, especially by Brody King. I love Brody King. So anyway, with that out of the way, let's actually talk about the match card for AEW All In at Wembley Stadium this Sunday, August 24th, 2024. Second year in a row. This is the card as it stands right now, for the card coming soon. On All In 0 Hour, the team of Willow Nightingale and Tomohiro Ishii, the Stone Pitbull, representing the conglomeration, takes on Chris Statlander and Stokely Hathaway. Yeah, Stokely's gonna die. He gonna die. He gonna die. And in the show proper, we probably will open with the Casino Gauntlet match. Winner gets a title shot at the AEW World Champion, guaranteed. Now, I have to say the Casino, I've said it before on social media, well, the little social media I have, but the Casino Gauntlet match is by far my favorite multi-man match type that AEW has ever come up with, and this is the third time they're doing it this entire year, so you know it's good. It's basically like a Royal Rumble, but the only way to win is to be the first pinfall or submission. So the end of the match can come literally any time. All the participants don't even need to be out there for the match to end. And oftentimes, the participants of the gauntlet match are typically kept a secret. We don't know who's going to show up. We don't know who's going to pop in. You never know. So, the last two Casino Gauntlet matches both were won by Will Ospreay. So, and as of course, we don't know who's going to be in it. The only people we know are in it are various members of the conglomeration, which include the ROH World Champion, Mr. Mark Briscoe, Kyle O'Reilly. Let's see, I think Roddy Strong is in it. Fucking wanker. Who said that? So yeah, also, as we saw last week, Orange Cassidy won his triple threat match against both Roddy and Core, and he will now be the first entrant into the match, meaning that he has the best chance of winning should he be able to beat the number 2. So there's that. We also know that Hangman Adam Page will be in it, homicidal as ever because of his desire to take the title off Swerve Strickland. Evil Uno was going to be in it, but he got attacked by Hangman, because yeah, Hangman's crazy now. Let's see, scrolling upwards, for the AEW Trios Championships, it will be the Bang Bang Scissor Gang, consisting of Hot Rock Hard Juice Robinson, Austin and Colton Gunn, the Gun Club, or the Guns, taking on the House of Black, consisting of Aleister Black, Brody King, and Buddy Matthews. Congratulations on getting married, buddy. Versus a mystery team to be named. We don't know who. And finally, the current AEW Trios Champions, the Patriarchy, consisting of the Dad of the Year, Christian Cage, his son, Nick Wayne, and Kill Switch. This will be a London ladder match, for the first time ever for the Trios belts. Who's the mystery team? There are a lot of good Trios teams coming up in AEW lately. You never know. For the FTW, for the AEW Tag Team titles, Dax and Cash, FTR, Platinum Max Caster, Anthony Bowen, the Acclaimed, and Nicholas and Matthew Jackson, the EVPs, the Young Bucks, triple threat tag match. It's going to be a one for the ages. We got 3 of the best tag teams in all of AEW going at it for those belts. Should be an absolute banger. For the FTW, for the World Championship, Hook with one eye takes on the champion, the Learning Tree, Chris Jericho. Hi, guys! I'm sort of starting to dig Chris Jericho's Learning Tree gimmick, especially when he says hi, guys. I don't know why. Chris Jericho just has a way of doing that. For the TNT Championship, Darby Allin takes on the Scapegoat, Jack Perry, in a coffin match. Per Jack Perry's request, because these two legitimately want to kill each other. I mean, have you been watching AEW this year? Darby Allin has set that son of a bitch on fire and then tried to set him on fire during the Blood and Guts match. That's how he got this title match in the first place. So yeah, for the AEW International / American Championship, MJF will defend against the aerial assassin Will Ospreay. The last time these two faced off, they had an absolute classic. My pick for match of the year. Nearly 60 minutes straight on Dynamite, these two went. And this feud has been the stuff of ages. For the TBS Championship, very much looking forward to this match. Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, takes on the two-belt champ herself, the CEO, Mercedes Moné. Sticking with the women, for the AEW Women's World Title, the Glamour, and Mariah May takes on her former friend and mentor, Timeless Toni Storm, which has very much been a brutal feud between these two. And finally, rounded off the main event, Swerve Strickland defends the AEW World Title against the American Dragon Bryan Danielson in a match that has been dubbed the Final Countdown, as it will be title versus career, meaning that if Bryan Danielson loses, he is vowed to never wrestle again. So that, yeah. All In is shaping up to be a one for the ages. If this is how the Amdrag is gonna go out, he's gonna go out against one of the best in the absolute world, and you know Swerve is gonna give him his best on Sunday. So here's open. So build might not have been that strong, but this AEW. They never miss when it comes to pay-per-views. Alrighty then. We talked the shit. We've done all this stuff. I think it's time for us to get to what we've been supposed to get in. Mr. Law, Traffy, could you do this? Thank you, Traffy. Yep. Yeah, I had a Trafalgar Law transition made. I made that myself. I hope you guys enjoyed it. All right. So tonight, we're going to be talking about something that my YouTube channel has been primarily based upon for the last, 9-10 years. It's what you see on the screen, Warmachine. I've been doing lore videos for Warmachine for God knows how long. I mean, and just to show you how long I've been doing it, I was the first person to ever do lore videos for Warmachine. Literally the first person, and I was doing it for years by myself. There were no other channels for me to take inspiration from. There are dozens of channels for 40k lore and what have you, but there were none for Warmachine lore, and I decided to change that. I'm not gonna say I'm saying some sort of trailblazer. I mean, this is just what I did because I enjoy the lore. I played Warmachine when I lived in Kansas City with my roommates. I got into it. I actually had an army, won a couple of matches, was in a couple of tournaments, came back home, got out of the game, but I kept going with the lore, and I decided, what if I do all videos about the lore of Warmachine? So that's what I did, and my first couple of videos were goddamn terrible. I had Windows Movie Maker, which we all know is pretty pathetic when it comes to editing stuff. I had my crappy Snowball, which was about to die on me. I didn't know how to edit. I didn't know how to add music. I didn't know how to audio edit. I didn't do anything. If I messed up on something, I'd have to scrap the entire recording and do it all over again. That's how much I did not know about editing. Yeah, BattleTech. I know some BattleTech lore videos, and yeah, I was the only one doing. There are some other videos other channels that have been doing lore, but just not as on a consistent level as me. So tonight we're going to be doing a basic deep dive. Now, I couldn't do a slideshow as I wanted because of the limitations of how many pictures you can put in a slideshow for Streamlabs. So I'm using my PDF reader. And I like this PDF reader. And I'll be just going through the lore. This is just a cover of one of the factions that we'll be looking at, but we won't be looking at the factions so far. First, we'll be looking at the history of the Iron Kingdoms. Because look at this shit. Look at this shit. See this? We got a guy with a sword, a woman with some guns, big steam machine mech behind them, and a fucking troll right in the foreground. How could you not want to get interested in this stuff? So yeah, I firmly love the lore of this, and I have spent years gathering what lore I could. Now, unlike with 40K, Warmachine does not have like an absolute library of Congress worth of content. They don't. They have there's some novels, but not as many as 40K. They've got audio dramas and other stuff. There's lore out there for Warmachine. It just doesn't happen a lot. All right, so we're gonna just get started right quick. So I'm gonna just do a basic history. I will be utilizing this this particular one, and from this particular book I'm looking at right now is from the Iron Kingdoms RPG core set, which gives you a very detailed history about all the events that that happen in the world of Warmachine and Hordes. I've read through this dozens of times over the years, and I will go back to this to get my references right. So if I make it, so I'm just doing like a brief, like condensing down events to their barest necessities. Yeah, the artwork for Warmachine and Hordes is fantastic. So, with that out of the way, let's get down to it. Now, a brief overview. Warmachine / Hordes is a steampunk-esque tabletop RPG in the same vein as Warhammer 40K. I've often said this, that Warmachine is 40K with 90% of the grimdark removed. Like, it's dark in places, but living in this world is not objectively horrible no matter which faction you pick. All the factions are not exactly what you call evil. In 40K, all the factions are evil in their own ways, in degrees. In 40K, it's just nations. Nations that just want to prioritize their own version of happiness over everything else. And that is where the lore starts. I say Warmachine and Hordes because it's two separate games with similar but different gameplay styles that take place in the same universe. And a lot of times, the lore crosses over between the Warmachine side and the Horde side. So, all right, so to get started, the entirety of Warmachine takes place on a singular planet. One planet in total, called Cain, spelled C-A-E-N. In fact, the entirety of the Warmachine lore takes place nearly entirely on a single continent. This is the continent you're looking at right now, the continent of Immoren. Now, for brevity's sake, this part of the map you're seeing is the western half of Immoren, or Western Immoren. This is where all the Warmachine stuff takes place. The other side of the continent, separated by a massive desert called the Bloodstone Marshes, is where the Horde's side of it takes place. So you can tell which side of the map you're on depending on which system you use. So there's that. Now it's mad depressing, but this is not so depressing. So I will just go through it and just go through a quick history of. Now, going through this stuff. Now, the exact history of Warmachine stretches all the way back to primordial days. Now, there are actually two specific schools of thought when it comes to the primordial gods. Now, there are three main gods. Well, there are other gods, but the three main ones that are the focus of the story are what I call the three primes. They are Menoth, the creator of man, the Devourer Worm, and Dunia. All three of these gods exist. Now, there is contention amongst the various factions and races in Warmachine about which of these gods came first, as well as specifically the origin of Menoth himself. Menoth is basically the Warmachine equivalent of the Judeo-Christian God. In their telling of how the world came to be, Menoth was fully formed. He existed already. He was already there. He just came across primordial Cain and just walked amongst it. Now, unfortunately, there is no official artwork depicting these three primes. We just have to go by your imagination. All we know about Menoth is that he is a gigantic humanoid in white robes, gold trim, and a giant mask. So, as he was strolling along ancient Immoren, or ancient Cain, he saw his nemesis, the second of the three primes, the Devourer Worm. Now, the Devourer Worm and the third of the primes, Dunia, are actually two sides of the same coin. They both represent nature. Dunia is like Gaia. She represents the more passive side of nature. Nature that's nurturing, that's calm, that's peaceful, gentle breezes, growing flowers, trees, animals that graze on them, sunshine, rainbows, all that sort of stuff. Just the positive aspects of nature. The worm represents the violent side of nature, the aggressive side, predatory animals that use claws and fangs and teeth and hooves to kill and maim, natural disasters, earthquakes, typhoons, lightning, thunder, tornadoes, tsunamis. He represents that. And he is described as being an ever-shifting mass of feathers and claws and teeth and fangs, just an eldritch nightmare. Now, in Mennoff beliefs, in Menite beliefs, Mennoff and the worm immediately saw each other, and they were like, it was on sight for the two of them, and they just started duking it out, and they tore up most of primordial Kane in their fight. Now, no one knows how long they fought. Some early estimates say they fought for centuries, but there was a break in the fighting, and Mennoff noticed that they had completely transcended the plane of existence that was Kane into an entirely spiritual realm called Urcane, spelled U-R-C-A-N-E. I mean C-A-E-N, my bad. And so the two of them continued their battle, but while before this battle was taking place, humanity sort of just popped up in Mennoff's shadow. So they just appeared in his shadow. But he didn't give two shits about humanity back then. He just simply wanted to fight the worm. Now, during this time period, he began noticing that when people die in Kane, their spirits would come over to Urcane, and they would be sheltered under whatever god or divinity that they happened to serve. And so he realized that if people served him, he could actually become more and more powerful and eventually find a way to kill the worm. And so during these early days, he did make himself known, but not to a discernible degree that people began actively worshiping him by the masses. Now, flipping this over, this is what Dunians believe. Those who worship Dunia, the mother goddess. They say that Dunia and the worm were actually the first two sentient gods on Kane. And they would have violent couplings. Basically, the worm would rape her. And during these violations, she would spawn the various non-human races that populate Kane. Your Gobbers, your Gatormen, your Pharaoh, your Trollkin, all these other races claim to be descendants of this coupling between them. And she just got tired of just being violated all the time. So during one of these violations, she created someone to take the worm's attention away from her. And this child of hers would be a hunter. And who's a better hunter than man? The creator of man, Mennoff. Now, Menites completely dismiss this because it's very heretical. They refuse. They see in Warmachine and Hordes, there are gods of every race, but they're all contention of who is the better god, because all the gods exist, every single one of them. And Menites cannot imagine that their god, their creator, came from a coupling between the worm and Dunia. So it's all up to you which one you want to believe. That's the only two contradictory informations that we have about the Devourer Worm and all this other stuff. Now this is all just talking about more stuff. All right. We're gonna go here now. If you're probably wondering, yes, there are elves and dwarves in the world of Warmachine and Hordes. And they actually have completely different origins from all the other ones. Now, first we're going to look at the gods of the elves, the Divine Court, as you can see on the screen. The Divine Court, 8 divinities who lived in an area away from Urcane, in an area in Urcane, but away from like where Mennoff and the worm were. This is an area called the Veld, and it was just like basically Garden of Eden shit, like verdant stuff, all this other stuff. It's just really good looking stuff. So they saw all these creatures being born from Dunya and the worm and Menoth, and saw how they were getting power from worship. And the Divine Court were like, "Hey, why don't we get on this?" And so they decided they were going to create their own mortal race, but they're not going to do it like the Dunians, who were created haphazardly by some violent couplings, or they were going to do it like Menoth and just have him pop up in their shadow and just don't really give two shits about him. They're going to have an active hand in the creation of their race, and their race was going to be special. They were going to have extremely long lives, longer compared to any other race in Cain. They would be incredibly intelligent. They would have mastery over the environment. They would have mastery over the elements. They would be superior in every regard. And the process basically involved the leader of the gods basically giving birth to the first generation of what would become elves. And while all the humans and all the other races on Cain were just eking out a living and for themselves, the elves were building a massive empire. They were utilizing technology beyond and magic beyond anyone's understanding. And that's because they had an advantage that no other race had before or since. They could actually talk to their gods. And I don't mean like in the way, oh, I pray to God every day and I hope he hears my prayers. No, they talk to their gods talk back through various means of communication. So if the gods wanted to do something, they would not send signs of importance. They would tell the elves, hey, you do this, do that, and they'd be like, okay. And so they actually created the first empire in the history of Cain, the Empire of Laios. But we'll get back to them in a second. We gotta go. Now we're now talked about the okay. This is not this one. All right. This is all concerning dwarves. Now, okay. This is the one I want. All right. As for dwarves, dwarves also have a very unique origin. In their words, what dwarves believe is that they don't even come from Cain itself. They come from a parallel world, somewhere beyond Cain itself. Now, they call this place, the place they call it was called Clarg Drogun, which translates to the land beneath. But a lot of people believe that that Clarg Drung was actually an area that existed in Urkane, similar to the Veld. But the dwarves say, no, it's a completely different place. It's completely different. Now, in this land, there existed this gigantic mountain god named Gore. Let me see if I get this. Now, Gore was the largest mountain in the entirety of Drogun, but he didn't have any worshippers. He wanted a monument to be built in his glory. Like, you're gonna be like, I need something to show people that I'm awesome. But there was nobody around to do that. So he decided that he was going to create 13 brothers. They were going to create 13 basically slaves, beings, to be his servants. And these were the 13 original dwarves. The 13 dwarves. And it says right here, their names are Drug, Dol, Devor, Gerd, Godor, Hord, Jord, Lahur, Odom, Orm, Sigmar, Udor, and Odor. And these were the Stone Fathers, as they were called. Now, the dwarves were naturally gifted in engineering and all types of working with their hands. So when they were first created, Gore told them to make him a monument, one that would proclaim his dominance and glory to the entire land. So the dwarves got to work. They started working, and they created this monument. It took them years to do. When they finally presented it to Gore, he immediately destroyed it and said, "It's not good enough, start again." The brothers worked again, this time building an even bigger, better orifice to showcase, using better jewels and better equipment and better materials. Then, after many years of work, they presented it to Gore, and he said, "No, it's not good enough. start again, and they trashed it, and he trashed it. Finally, they worked a third time, this time pouring every ounce they could do. They scoured the entire lands for the best jewels, the best ores, all of it, just to make this monument. It took them decades to do it. And finally, and they were proud of this work. During this time, they learned that they liked building shit. They liked building stuff with their hands, like all good dwarves do. And finally, they were very proud, like he couldn't possibly find anything wrong with this. So they presented him his monument, and Gore destroyed it. And he said, "It's not good enough, start again." So the brothers were like, they were depressed. Like, they realized that no matter what they did, no matter how good the work they put in to make this monument for this son of a bitch, it was never going to be good enough. They were going to spend their lives trying to appease someone who could not be appeased. So they decided, okay, we have to get our freedom. So the leader of the brothers went to Gore and said, okay, we figured out the problem why you don't like the monuments. We've been using substandard stuff all around you. You're the mountain god here. You're the best mountain in the entire world, meaning that you have the best ores, gold, silver, diamonds, gems, rocks, and all other stuff. What better material should we use to glorify your greatness than pieces of you? Now, common sense would tell you that this was to be a bad idea. But Gore was so goddamn arrogant. He was like, okay, do it. So the brothers hatched a plan. So for decades, they would go into Gore and they would take bits and pieces of his internal, of his interior, of the inside of his mountain, and they would come out hauling out the stuff. And the mountain got smaller and weaker, but they kept saying, hey, we're almost done. We just need a little bit more of you, and it will be great. We promise. And Gore, in his ego, was like, take as much as you need. So, after decades of working, they created a massive monument, an edifice that reached all the way up into the sky itself. And they presented it to Gore, and he said, it's perfect. And then, turns out that what he didn't know was that the brothers had completely hollowed him out from the interior. He was only being held up by support beams and buttresses. And then once they said that, they pulled the rope, undid all the buttresses, and Gore collapsed in on himself, killing him stone dead. And so the 13 brothers were freed from him for good. All right, let me see if I'm just trying to get my stuff doing. I just had to get my my work. All right, from after Gore fell, a bunch of monsters just came out, and they just wanted to seize all the lands for themselves. The dwarves were not only great engineers, they were also hardy warriors. So they were able to fight off the monsters with the weapons they made, which were of great quality. So after earning a bit of peace, they returned to the ruins of Gore, and they found a chasm. He decided to enter in the chasm, and they found that the cave actually came out into Kane, specifically to an area in the north called the Glass Peaks. The brothers were amazed by what they saw. The land was fertile. The materials were of excellent quality. It just looked great. So the first thing they decided was, you know what? So you know what? Let's make some wives. So each of the brothers got to work at a lake, and they began making these clay effigies of women, one for each of them, one for their own individual tastes, and they were able to bring them to life, and they married those women, and these women would become known as the clay wives. So you had the stone fathers and the clay mothers, or the clay wives. Now, during their time in the Glass Peaks, the stone fathers and the clay wives had clans each of themselves. They had dozens of children, and all these children would form clans based on their parentage. And these would form the basis of the 13 clans that exist in their area of Western Imran. For good. Now, then afterwards, for whatever reason, the Clay Mothers and the Clay Mothers and the Stone Fathers, they left, and no one knows where they went. But they left their kids with their descendants with enough knowledge and wisdom to build up a community for themselves and protect themselves. And so was born the nation of Rule. See, in Warmachine and Hordes, dwarves aren't really called dwarves; they're called Rule folk. So, but I just say dwarves just so you can understand it better. Now, right here in the middle of the screen, this is those dots. These are the edicts. These are the edicts that they handed down that the Stone Fathers gave to their children and their clans to stabilize the authority, to stabilize their and unify them as a community. We have the Edict of Authority, the Edict of Building, the Edict of Duels, the Edict of Feuds, the Edict of Odes, the Edict of Ownership, and the Edict of Unity. Now, these edicts would form one of the largest compendiums in all of Western Imran, and maybe even all of Cain itself, the Great Codex. Now, the Codex, before you think, it's not a book. It is actually a massive library. They just call it the Codex for short. It is a massive library containing dates, court rulings, histories, all of it, and very few outside of out of Rule folk actually can actually see or know the location of the Codex. Very few people or humans have ever seen the Codex, let alone been inside the Codex. So yeah. And Rule has actually the distinction of being the longest continuous civilization in all of Imran. They have never been conquered. They've had internal disputes, but they have never fallen. They are just strong like that. All right. Then we move to the tribal era. During this time period, Menoth found that not enough humans were worshiping him, so he decided that he was just going to give them some gifts to help them out. While he was wrathful for people not worshiping him, he was also very forgiving. So he gave them his gifts of Menoth. And these gifts were the flame, the wall, the sheaf, and the law. The flame, according to this, embodies many principles of the Mennonite faith, including the legacy of the temples to preserve and teach religious doctrine. The wall represents knowledge of masonry and engineering in order to create better shelters. The sheaf is knowledge of agriculture, where the tribes began to till the earth and irrigate. And the law is considered the greatest gift Menoth gave, representing a compact between Menoth and humanity, which also settles mankind into castes and combining tribes into the first cities. That's why Menoth is often called the lawgiver, because he gave the law to humanity. Now, the empire of the empire of Laos. Now here's a very important event. Now, in those ancient times, while humans and other races were still struggling, the elves spread and multiplied, thanks to the divine court just talking to them and being able to guide them with a stern hand. They were dealing with other races, such as the Scorn, who we'll get to, and they were and some of the oldest records of human history talk about the great capital of Nasil, the capital of the Ruic Empire. It only to be matched by really nothing. So I'm not going to talk about the feud of ages. Okay, but this is all the this is the prehistoric era. So I'm going to go through this right quick. So now I forgot to tell you, when counting time period, we have BR and AR, before rebellion, after rebellion. We'll get to that in a little bit, but 10,000 BR, elves unite as an empire of Laos in eastern Imran. 8,500 to 8,200 BR, the feud of ages amongst the dwarves, resulting in the capital city of Gore being settled. 7,500 BR, rule is established by the Stone Lords and the Moot of the 100 Houses. The Moot is actually the prime legal and judicial body of the entirety of rule. 6,500 to 6,000 BR. The canon of the true law is founded in Ichthyr, and Synod becomes the first priest king. 4,250 BR, the construction begins of the Bridge of Worlds, and so on and so forth. This is a lot of information. If you want to look at it yourself, you can stop the video on the VOD and watch it and look at it yourself. Now, one of the two primary, one of the most important events that happened, I mentioned the name, was a man named Synod. Synod was the first of what became known as the Priest Kings. He was the first one to start to unify humanity under a single leader, and so he would found the ancient city called Ichthyr, which would be a holy site for all Menites. According to the scriptures, the passages of the true law speak of kings that will rise by the will of Menoth, and whose holiness will allow them to serve as conduits for the divine. These will become known as the early priest kings of the Menite faith. All right, so now let's talk about dragons. Now, dragons are a way bit different than what you're used to here in Emerald, especially Cain. There is no real origin for the dragons as a race. Well, not as a race, but in the first dragon was called Torok, also known as the Dragon Father, and my Crix folks would understand who that is. A little bit of water. Now, no one knows exactly where this dragon came to be. No one knows where he came from, how he came to be, none of that. We don't know shit about his origins. He is just a extremely powerful, extremely vicious dragon. Now, dragons in Warmachine and Hordes are very intelligent, and they have a type of primitive magic called Dragon Blight, which can be used for a number of effects, but generally, it's like radiation to normal people. Like, Dragon Blight can have a detrimental effect on your health and even can cause mutations if you are around or directly exposed to Dragon Blight. Like, the very least it can do to you is kill you. At the very most, it can mutate you into like a lesser dragon or some other horrible thing. So, while all this was going on, Turk was just flying over the skies of Cain, and he saw all these creatures being born and all these races popping into existence. So he decided that he wanted his own people. He wanted his own children. So here's the thing about dragons in Warmachine. They're functionally immortal because they have this thing called an Athank. It is a large heartstone that is at the center of a dragon. And the Athank is, by all intents and purposes, completely indestructible. If you destroy a dragon's body, it won't kill them. It will just let them reform it into any shape they desire. An Athank, unless you destroy the Athank, which is not really possible by even human or elven standards, the dragon could always come back to life and reform his body. Now, Torok knew exactly that his claws were strong enough to, like, shard off pieces of his own Athank. So he reached into his chest and began to chip off pieces of his Athank. And each piece was, like, really big. And each piece grew into its own dragon, creating the race of dragons. Now, he wanted them to be his subservient servants, but the problem was his dragon children were too much like him, in that Torok believed he was superior to all other forms of life, and his children believed that they were superior to every other form of life, including each other and including their father. So, about as immediately as they were born, they immediately turned on Torok, and the first ever dragon war took place. Now, Torok himself, he was still, while his Athank had been splintered a bit, he was still the largest and most powerful dragons. So any other of his children who tried to fight him, he straight up killed in battle, ate their Athanks, and reconstituted back into his own system. Many of the other dragons have gone into hiding or formed temporary alliances with each other for mere survival, as Torok's goal now is to find all of his wayward children, kill them, and reabsorb his Athank, because if they won't serve him, they're damn sure not going to live. Now, there are a lot of named dragons. Its names such down here are Ashenfos, Blightergast, Charsong, Howlfang, and Scarfang. But one that will come up later in this video is Everblight. Keep that name in mind. Now, there was another force coming up, the Mulgur. Basically, the Mulgur were a bunch of worm worshippers. They were of many different races that just came together out of worship for the worm and a hatred for all that was civilized. They didn't speak a unified language. They were just a bunch of tribes that got together, and it was just nasty. They would do shit like cannibalism, self-mutilation, bloodletting, child sacrifice. It was a mess. The Mulgur were were able to create a tongue for themselves, drawing together different dialects from over 1,000 tribes. So basically, the Mulgur language is a mutant language of thousands of different dialects smushed together. And now we come to one of the most important events in the entire continent's history, the Cataclysm. Now, during this time period, the Iosan gods decided that the elven gods, the divine court, decided that they wanted to tarry amongst their creations. They wanted to actually be with their children, in effect. And so they began a project called the Bridge of Worlds. I mentioned that before in the timeline. The Bridge of Worlds would be a massive project that would require the entire Laos Empire and every citizen working together to build it. Think of it like Tequila Wolf from One Piece. One half was being built in Kane, the other half was being built in the Veld, and they would just meet sort of in the middle. And it wasn't just a big ass bridge, it was a technological marvel, just utilizing complex arcane formulae and different sort of energies that no one had even heard of, let alone mastered outside of the elves. And this project lasted for generations, but it wasn't a problem for the elves because, again, elves very long lived. So the day came. The day finally came. The Bridge of Worlds was completed. All right. The Bridge of Worlds was finally completed. Nearly the entirety of the elven race congregated at Nysil, the capital of the empire. It was festivals for weeks as the completion of the bridge was finalized. Soon they will be able to speak with and talk to their gods and see them and touch them and interact with them more than just over distances. So the bridge was turned on, the portal opened, and one by one, every member of the Divine Court stepped out onto the bridge and onto Kane, and finally meet their children. But it didn't last long. Now, what exactly happened, we don't know. There is no surviving records or any first-hand accounts because it happened thousands upon thousands of years ago, and none of the documentation about the Bridge of Worlds exists, so we don't even know, you can't even check over their work. But for whatever reason, a few seconds after the Divine Court stepped into Kane off the bridge, it blew up. And I don't mean like in a oh, it just exploded and everything went okay. I'm talking about the closest thing to a tactical nuke that you will ever see in Warmachine. Like that. The Empire of Laos was completely and utterly obliterated. Millions of elves were killed in an instant. And this was such they called this the Cataclysm. And it was such that every major race that had any kind of documentation or written down accounts have some writings that talk about this time. Like early Menite priests from Ichthyr talk about a time when the skies were blackened and there was fire that couldn't be put out on the ground. They called it the day the sky burned. It lived up to its name, the Cataclysm. And during this time, the explosion itself was of such massive proportions that it actually changed the face of Emerald forever. It created two areas of Emerald. The Stormlands, which is an area to the north where it's always thundering and lightning and just storms 24/7, every day. no breaks. And at the bottom was the Bloodstone Marshes, the massive desert that split the continent from east to west. Now, while the elves were not screwed over by completely, the few thousands that were directly near the divine court were saved by them because the court were fast enough to put up a shield protecting themselves and the elves and their elven children from the blast, saving them. But everything they worked on for thousands upon thousands of years, gone in a second. The greatest empire that Emerald would ever know was gone, and the elves were without a home. But okay, we'll get to that we'll get back to that in a little bit. All right, right now we're going to be talking about Mord. Now, it's like it says here, sometime in 480 B, 4800 BR, about 8 centuries before the time of the burning sky, there was a strong civilization that took root. This civilization became known as the Kingdom of Mord. Very little is known about Mord, other than the fact that it was not a nice place to be. There were rumors and stories of dark magic and forbidden rituals that would turn you away from the glory that was Menoth. And even to this day, in the modern day lore, the word Mord conjures up images of the dark and forbidden. That even though the kingdom doesn't exist anymore, it still maintains a presence in the minds, the collective imagination of humanity, because Mord was just horrible. All right. Next up. The Morgul decided that they inhabited the Morgul actually dominated the mountains of the west and actually existed in the Bloodstone Marshes. And following the example of Sinat and those who came after him, they quickly set out to till the fertile land and create settlements for themselves. The communities were united under the warrior priest named Valiant of Thrace around 2800 BR. They worked together to create a massive city called Calacia. It's a fortress that would become a thriving city. Now, the Mulgur, as you can see, did not like this, and so they began to siege Calacia and began to fight just to outright fight with them. They had, thankfully, the Chalcians actually had deadlier weaponry like the recurve bow, which was better than the hunting bows they were used. And around about 2230 BR, there was a priest king called Golovant was born. He became one of the most prominent leaders of the early Mennonite church, and would fight in it. Would be one of the leaders to fight against the Mulgur. During this time period, a champion actually rose up amongst the Mulgur tribes by the name of Horfall Grimmer, who commanded an entire horde that was dedicated to breaking down the walls of Calacia and burning it to the ground. A battle took place at a place called the Shield of Thrace, and the Mulgur pretty much lost it. They lost that battle. Golovant fought with Grimmer several times, and the Mennonites gained the upper hand. He led his people to push the Morgur back and was able to break their battlements. Grimmer was actually captured and presented to the remaining barbarians, and he was basically tortured and executed and said, "Here's your leader. He ain't shit. Try something else." Grimmer, for his worth, he was defiant to the end. He was basically William Wallace in Braveheart. He did not give up. He just fought to the very last end. So, after the savage tribes of the Mulgur were broken, and they never were united like that ever again. After Golovant's death, his son was slain by his rivals, and Calacia got into some fragmentation. Around 2051 BR, his grandson succeeded in uniting the region once more, and he renamed Calacia into the name that it has now, Caspia. And he decided that he wanted to erect better walls, hence why Caspia now has the nickname the City of Walls. All right, far up into the north, a fierce warrior priest named Kardovic was trying to unite his people in the far north, and he did so. He was a fierce, proud man and fanatically pious for Menoth, and he decided that he was led a campaign and got rid of all the Mulgur and worm worshippers and spread and he was able to convert millions to the lawgiver, given a strong presence in the country that would become now known as Kador. So there's that, and he formed what became known as the Kardic Empire. Now, we enter the Thousand Cities era. This is the more modern take of this. So we're in the Thousand Cities era. We're basically about to we're basically where basically there were just little city-states everywhere. Now, this era is very well important because of this symbol, these two symbols right here, the twins. Now, the twins are Morrow and his twin sister Thamar. They were born around 1930 BR. Now, little is known about their exact past, but what is known is that their parents were very devout Mennonites, but they saw hypocrisy in the Mennonite church, and they decided that they were going to go about their faith in a completely different manner. Morrow believed in just being a nice person, not just being adherent to the law, but just being nice to your fellow man, just doing nice stuff, being a righteous person, living rightly. It doesn't matter if you believe in Menoth, you just had to be a nice person. His sister, however, Thamar, believed that the pursuit of knowledge is not wrong. You have to pursue knowledge in all of its forms. It doesn't matter what the knowledge is or what you did to attain it, so long as you obtain knowledge and better yourself. That's all that matters. So, while these two did have wildly different ideas about how to practice religion, what they had in common was the fact that they did not like the Church of Morrow. It was just they just wanted people to be more freer and not be oppressed by the church. So over time, the twins actually grew in power. They had followers from all over the Thousand Cities, and at one point they were able to even march on the city of the very seat of power for the Mennonite Church, Caspia, and they pretty much came in and they were welcomed as heroes. But during this battle, the battle, Morrow actually fought the current priest king back then, and he disarmed him and was able to defeat him. Thamar then just came in and killed him with a spear to the chest. Morrow didn't like this because the guy had basically killed a prisoner when the battle was won. This was the start of their divide. When they were welcomed as heroes. People wanted Morrow to actually rule the city and guide the people. He wasn't exactly for this, but he still decided to do it reluctantly, hoping to use his principles to help. Now, their Bible is something called the Enchiridion. And according to the Enchiridion, it was a time of ordeals as he faced dilemmas that had no easy solutions. I mean, being a leader isn't all that's cracked up to be, and he learned that. He had no desire. Now, the first major trial came from the Mennonite priests. Like, he was now people wanted to drive them out of the city, but he didn't want to do that, and he didn't want to deprive them of their religion, so he gave an accord. He would promise to protect the Mennonite temples, and he would pay homage to Menoth as the creator of man. But on the flip side, their request was that Thamar had to answer for murdering of the priest king. He brought his sister before their judge, and she begged for forgiveness, but Morrow found her sorrow to be insincere, so he threw her out. He exiled her for Caspia, saying if she returned, she would die. After this, she decided that she became further embittered to any authority at all, including her own brother. Years later, Thamar spent, while she was living in exile, she studied occult sciences from the fringes of society. She studied alchemy, shamans from worm worshippers, sages from the Black Kingdom of Mord. She invented her own alphabet and called her own Talgesh, which is a key, and she even waged her own private war against Mennonite priests and sowed dissension in Caspia from afar. This would come out in 1894 BR when she returned to the city in charge of an army, threatening to throw them down. Eventually, the two came to blows with each other. The both of them had gotten so powerful in their own understanding of mysticism that they were basically demigods at this point. During the battle, Morrow realized that he was doing more damage than he was protecting people, so he just laid down his arms and he just allowed Thamar to kill him. And what happened was, because of this sense of self-sacrifice, Morrow underwent apotheosis. In other words, he ascended at that moment to become a god. And upon seeing this, Thamar was instantly jealous. She was like, how did he do that? And she realized that she had to perform self-sacrifice for her own benefit. So the angry crowd that was pissed off at her for killing their leader, she let them tear her apart, and she ascended as a god herself. And so out of this, the followers of Morrow became the Church of Morrow, and the followers of Thamar became Thamarites. So, and for a long time, the Church of Morrow was the dominant religion of Caspia. Throughout all the years, I'm just like I'm speed running through this. Throughout all the years, certain Thamarites and certain Morrowians actually were exhibited their beliefs so much that they actually ascended to become demigods. They became ascendants for Morrowians and scions for Thamarites. Now there are dozens of ascendants and Thamarites and ascendants and scions in this show, and yeah, so I'm not going to get into all of them. We'd be here all night. Now, similar to Menoth, they do have a heaven for those who follow them, and they're not on the side of Menoth, but they're not on the side of the Worm. They're just on their side in the War of Souls that's going on in Urkane right now. All right. We got the Wars of the North. Mord eventually fell. We had a reconciliation of faiths as the Moravians and the Menites, after the Purgings had happened, because there, of course, are Purgings. They both agreed to a peaceful coexistence. The Menites were like, you can still worship Morrow, but you still have to give deference to Menot. Are we okay with that? Okay, we're cool. All right, so like I said, I'm speed running through this. Now we have we have reached the age of reason, basically the Clockwork Renaissance, basically the modern day European Renaissance for them. And this is where we start seeing some stuff like steam engines and early trains and locomotives and paddle wheels, just a lot of technology that just showed that they were on the precipice of doing something great. Now, before we go to the next part, you're probably wondering, wait, Shin, what's up with the dragon? What happened to him? Well, there's this thing. So, Turek decided that he needed a base of operations to lead his one dragon war against his own people. And so, he found some islands off the coast of Immoren, on the west coast of Immoren, called the Broken Coast. And there's the ocean, the sea there is called the Meridius, the ocean that separates Immoren from the rest of the other continents. Now, in 1000 before 1000 BR, the largest of those islands was called the Scarred Islands, which was a home for pirates and raiders and ne'er-do-wells. And they were ruled over by a group known as the Pirate Kings. Now, Turek found these islands, and according to this, he found that his greatest and most intelligent of his brood had created alliances for mutual protection, and they had attacked Turek many times in Immoren. In their greatest clash, they fought in a battle that the sky caused the skies to boil with the heat of their fire, and blighted blood and fire rained down onto the wastes. And for the first time, Turek was forced to flee, driven from Immoren. The Lord he found himself on the Scarred Islands to make his new lair. He didn't have time to recover from his wounds, but immediately began subjugating the island's inhabitants that would worship him as a god. But first he sent an emissary to the Pirate Kings, and they just said, "Fuck you, eat a dick. We're not listening to you." Pissed off, he came up to them and transformed them and their crews using their blight into his the first of what will become his Iron Liches, his undead generals and servants of his empire. So with those undead, he turned the Scarred Islands into his own empire. This will become the first of the true first of the Iron Kingdoms, the Nightmare Empire of Crix. All right, so the Mulgur have been smashed. We got the Cardic Empire in the upper north doing some things. We got a renaissance happening. All this other stuff, good stuff happening for humanity. But then reports began coming in from coastal villages of mysterious black-sailed ships being spotted coming from the Meridius. This will be the first encounter with the Orgoth. Now, the Orgoth would go on to become major part of Warmachine lore. This is one of the most pivotal events in the modern lore. This is called, as you can see on screen, this is called the Orgoth Occupation Era. Now, this entire era is divided up into 3 sections: the invasion, the occupation, and finally the expulsion. Now, when the Orgoth first arrived on Immoren, they were just pillaging. Like, basically, people thought they were just a new breed of pirate. They were pillaging lands, but they were being repulsed. And nobody thought different of them. But what they were doing was they were probing the defenses. And then finally, they came in mass. They started taking over little ports, and then coastal communities, and then whole cities. And then they found a beachhead, and finally they were able to invade Immoren proper. And they just went ham. Like, these guys were like, they were like Vikings, but on crack and speed and weed. These guys did not give a single solitary fuck. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, these guys must be dangerous. The rest of the cities must have united against them, right? Wrong. All 1,000 cities hate each other, and as all the cities were falling to the Orgoth, their rivals were like, oh, I'll just pay them off. Look how they took out my opponents. I'll pay them off and they'll leave me alone. They thought wrong, and the Orgoth went after them. By the time they realized that the Orgoth were not playing around, it was far too late. They had conquered most of Western Immoren. They basically split the continent in half. Then they moved on to the Cardic Empire and laid waste to them sons of bitches. They just did not give 2 solitary shits. And I'm going to fast forward to a moment to let you know what had happened. Yeah, this is an Orgoth. Yeah, we don't really have a good, clear picture of these guys. Look at this. Look at this motherfucker. He looks evil. And these guys were straight up evil. Like, not only would they kill you, they had these things called war witches. And they would actually absorb the souls of the people they killed and use them for their dark magic, for whatever that reason is. So if you were captured by an Orgoth and you were captured alive, you were theirs, wholly, literally body and soul. Like, even if they killed you, your torment with the Orgoth does not end. In fact, one of the artifacts that keep getting found in Western Immoren was something called a Fellblade. A Fellblade is a large fuck-off sword that has faces of countless screaming folks embedded on the face that are constantly shifting and changing. And if you pick a Fellblade up, you will turn into a homicidal berserker, and you will just have this overwhelming urge to kill everyone around you. Using a if you find a Fellblade, don't touch it, or you're gonna lose yourself. So, like I said, here it says the Cardic Empire fell in 569 BR, and one of the other major nations, Rhaenyr, surrendered in 542. Now, they finally came to Caspia. Caspia's king was killed in battle, and so the heads of the 2 churches, the Church of Morrow and the Menite Church, came together as leaders for Caspia. And they came together and they were like, okay, we got to figure out a way to maybe if we go to them in peace and let them know that we just want to be peacefully coexist with them, maybe they'll leave us alone. So the two leaders of the churches went out and met this massive army of barbarians and came out in peace. No weapons, no armor, no army, nothing. They were promptly captured and decapitated, and their heads placed on spikes. And one of the and here's an excerpt. One of the Mennonite clerks, a Garvin Drathelius, stood atop the word and gave witness to the words spoken by the leader of the Orgoth in Clogizin. And this is some chilling stuff right here. You are ours. Your women, your children, they are no longer yours. You belong to us. Your every breath, your every drop of blood, every inch of your skin, every tear, every laugh, every broken bone, every drop of sweat is ours. You are the chattel of this land, made fat by your own weakness. That I deign to speak to you this once is a warning. Your bodies in life are ours. In death, your souls belong to us. Yeah. Chilling shit. So, but here's the thing. Now, while Caspia did lose its king and its leaders of its religion, they were not conquered. Caspia is the only city that would not fall to the Orgoth because of the walls. But that doesn't mean they were doing hunky-dory. The city was in deep famine due to the Orgoth just kind of boycotting their supply lines. Living inside Caspia was not all sunshine and roses. There was a lot of dark shit that went on. So the Orgoth would go on to rule the vast majority of Western Emerald, the whole of humanity in Western Emerald, for going on 400 years. Now, I forgot to mention, we got to talk about the elves again. Now, the surviving elves would be led by the divine court to a land for themselves. So they spent many generations just wandering the wilderness. And soon, one by one, the gods began to disappear as they wanted to find a way to get back to the Veld, because their powers, as great as they were weakening and failing. But they were strong enough to lead them to a new kingdom, the kingdom of Ios, the Iosan Empire. This would be on the furthest edges of Western Emerald and the other kingdoms. Now, the elves actually divided up into two different subsects. You had the more modern Iosan elves, and then you had the nice elves, spelled W-Y-S-S. I don't mean they were nice elves, they were nice elves. You get what I mean. So they would found the nice elves actually stayed in the upper wildernesses and became more like hunter-gatherers sort of folks. And while there's no rivalry between Iosan and nice elves, they still don't really get along. So there's that. Now I bring them up is because the Orgoth actually did if you're wondering why, what their interactions were with the other races, with the rural folk did not particularly like the Orgoth. They liked humanity because of their industriousness and all the things that they created through their engineering means. The Orgoth didn't like the Orgoth. They didn't really have to fuck with them that much. In fact, the Orgoth did try to invade Rule once, and only once, and they basically didn't even get past the front door. The Orgoth got their shit wrecked by the dwarves, and they never tried it again. And once they did that, they knew that the elves were even better than they were, so they were like, yeah, we're leaving those fuckers alone. So yeah, it was not a good time for under the Orgoth occupation. They took slaves by the boatloads. No one, to this day, no one knows exactly where the Orgoth came from. If you were put on a boat, sent back to their homeland, you were never seen again. And Orgoth very rarely, if ever, interbreeded with Emerician folks. And if someone was pregnant with their child, they just kill them. They did not like to share that shit. So we know very little about the Orgoth, other than the fact that they were fucking brutal. Alright. Now, this would have probably been it for mankind in Immoren, but two events happened. The first one was called the Gift of Magic. Now, before this, humanity did not know magic. Sure, they could use magical items created by other races who were more gifted with magic, but they couldn't use magic overall. But somewhere during the occupation, people began being born with the ability to use magic. And it was a big deal. And they saw this, and no one knows why that is. Many thought that this was some kind of cosmic way of the universe balancing itself out to give humanity the edge. Others believe that it was Menoth who was using his wisdom to give mankind a fighting chance against the Orgoth. And for a while, magicians and wizards and what they call arcanists were fighting back against the Orgoth. And the Orgoths began witch hunts where they began to hunt down anyone with any kind of arcane ability. All right, let's see the Circle of the Oath. I'll get to them later. Now, there were many attempts to rebel against the Orgoth, which leads to the third era, the Orgoth Rebellion. And the first spark came at the end of the year 1 BR when an Orgoth governor at a fortress in the city of Farin said the city had to send 8,000 slaves across the ocean. When many of the priesthood, as the lottery was implemented, this was chosen by lots, and as the lottery was implemented, it became obvious that the Menite and Morrowind priesthoods were being targeted, as every priest of both faiths in the city were chosen. So this was a targeted bit of oppression by the Orgoth, and they just wouldn't have it anymore, and the city just rose up in outright rebellion. And they were aided by a group known as the Order of the Golden Crucible, who were studying arcane weapons and other tools. Thank you, Devil. Thank you. Soon the rebellion spread across the entirety of the region, and a full-on rebellion called the first proper organized rebellion was called the Iron Fellowship, and they openly declared war on the Orgoth in the year 1 AR, or after rebellion. They were drawing folks from across the entirety of the lands, but the Fellowship only survived for 6 years until it was completely destroyed by the Orgoth in 7 AR. Modern historians were convinced that the failure of the rebellion were convinced that the rebellion was inevitable, but that success was not. So, during this time period, there were many scientists who came up, and it actually started inventing something called the firearm, invented by arcanists. And it was and also there was an event that happened during the time of the great during the time when humans began popping up with the gift of magic. An event known as the Rivening was happening in Ios, and considering that Ios is very xenophobic, nobody knew about it until much later. This is a time when a lot of priests and magicians and wizards in Ios began going mad and started killing themselves, and we don't know because the gods had already vanished. There was the Riplung Plague from 83 to 93 AR, which Riplung is a nasty bit of a disease. And finally, we reached the second half of the equation, the Mechanica Revolution. Mechanica is basically a fusion of science and sorcery. And this fusion is referred to as a field called Mechanica. And there's a lot of other details in this, but basically they were able to make magic pistols. But the big thing is they were able to make something called a cortex, which was a ball of magically inscribed metal, and you could imbue orders and commands into the metal. And they found if you place this cortex into a mechanical chassis, it would give the chassis semi-sentience. It would follow basic orders if it was given. This was the first generation of steamjacks, semi-sentient, steam-powered automatons. Now, at first they were just used for labor, but of course the various rebellions found that this was very useful in combating in the Orgoth. And so they began constructing these larger versions called colossals, and these bastards were huge. So the rebellion, so we're going to fast forward this. So let me try to find the name of these folks. The Iron Alliance, which was a follow-up to the Iron Fellowship. They began to work effortlessly. They began to work furiously. There were leaderships from all across Emerald. There were even a few Trollkin in there. And sorry. All right. Now, the Iron Alliance were the first to weaponize these steamjacks into the modern day warjacks. Now, not everyone can use a warjack. You needed to have a fine arcane mastery to be able to command one. And doing so, they will follow your commands up to a certain range. If they got out of range of you, they would go just shut down and become inert. And the Orgoth began targeting these commanders outright. So the Iron Alliance began bringing people around them, like entire troops, to protect them or give them thicker armor to survive in conflicts. This is the first modern interpretation of the modern battle group. So after years upon years of fighting, the Iron Alliance were finally able to drive the Orgoth out. But as they were fleeing, the Orgoth just did something called the Great Scouring. They took away with them any documentation, any notes, anything that could be traced back to their race, and they either took it with them or destroyed them. They massacred slaves who knew their language. They poisoned fields, burnt crops. They were sore losers, and they were driven from Emerald, supposedly forever. I won't get to that. Now, the Council of the Ten Leaders met in Corvus, which was the site of the major which was the site of the foundation of the Iron Alliance. And they decided that since they drove them out, they needed new kingdoms, and so they began the Corvus treaties. These treaties would create out of this treaty 4 new kingdoms would be founded: Signar in the south, Kadar in the north, Lael to the northeast, and Or to the west. Now, not everyone was happy with this. The Khadorans, who remember the days of the old Cardic Empire, were pissed off because Ord and Lael were formerly part of the old Cardic Empire, and they felt cheated. This would lead to a lot of enmity between Signar and Kador that would last for generations. And so, years later, this would begin what becomes known as the Iron Kingdoms era. And a lot of shit went down. These are modern day warjacks. This is a Signaran warjack. This is the red one is a Khadoran warjack. And there's a lot more going on here, but I'm not going to get into it. This is just, like I said, this is just a small thing here. So now that's where things stand pre-Oblivion. What's pre-Oblivion? I may get to that if we got some time. But that's basically the history of Western Emerald and everything that's happened from this point on. Now, thankfully this book also has some background on the various races and people in Western Emerald. So we'll go to that. Of course, we have humanity. We have your Caspian. Those to the south are called Caspians and Sulis. I'll get to Sulis in a minute. We have the Idrians, which are a diverse people who inhabit the Bloodstone Marshes, so desert folk. Then we have the Cards, are the Cardic Empire's people, what they're basically called. The subsect is also called Kassites, which are more rustic and lankier folks of a forested tribe called Kos, hence the name Kassites. Midlanders, Mordanes, the Rhines. The Scards are the people who live in the Scarred Islands. The Skirabs are more Cadoran folks, Tadorians, Umbrians, and other human ethnicities. Now, we get first off on our list, we have Gobbers, or goblins. There are two distinct species of goblin. Gobbers are the most numerous of the two species. Very small in stature, they're about 3 feet, and they seem non-threatening to them. Gobbers are very good at surviving in urban environments, and typically are found around small businesses and small urban areas doing repair jobs and scraps. They're very less civil. There are some less civilized gobbers with shamans and chieftains and what have you. The others of goblins are bogrins. Bogrins are more wilder than their cousins. They're recognizable by the ridges on the tops of their head, and they have body piercings and tattoos, and considered more aggressive and violent than gobbers. Then we got trollkins. Trollkins are basically trolls, giant hulking brutes with incredible hardiness and resiliences. I'll get to trollkins in a bit. I've already mentioned rule folk, dwarves basically. Now, I want to talk about these guys, Orgrins. Orgrins are an offshoot of Trollkins. They're their whole thing. They're like orcs in a way. Orgrins are often found around rule folks, or around rule, because they are very well tied to the entirety of dwarvish society. They have an entire society based on honor and dedication and what have you. And Orgrins are basically samurai of a sort, in that they want to serve a master for the rest of their lives. I've already mentioned the Iosan elves, the Nice elves, and of course they got other races such as the Gatormen, Pharaoh, Bogtrogs, Croaks, and a few others. Of course, we have the languages like Caspian, which is extinct. We have Signarin, which is in its offshoot Sulese, Lyolese, which a lot of people call their version of French. We have Auric, which is very rustic, Scarred language, and we have modern day Cadoran, which is basically Russian. And all these other languages, Kassite, Umbrian, Mulgur, Ardarian, and all this other stuff. So, that's the basic gist of the world of Warmachine and its history. So now we're going to move on to the various factions that make up this part. All right, and first and foremost, we're going to start with the ones you saw earlier, Cygnar. And here is a faction map. Cygnar, southernmost of all the Iron Kingdoms. Cygnar is also the most technologically advanced, the most research-rich nation in the entirety of all the Iron Kingdoms. They utilize actually lightning and conductive electricity in their weaponry, making their warjacks very advanced by human world standards anyway. Let's see. The Cygnaran military, the Cygnaran hierarchy is a constitutional monarchy. As of this Oblivion, it is currently ruled over by King Julius Ralthorn, and he is aided by the Cygnaran Inner Circle and the Cygnaran Royal Assembly. Below them, in part of the military, we have 3 specific branches of the Cygnaran military. We have in the center the Cygnaran Royal Army, the Cygnaran Navy to the right, and the Cygnaran Reconnaissance Service, or the CRS, to the left, which basically acts like the CIA. Now, the most prominent thing that happened in the recent history of Cygnar was known as the Lion's Coup. A few years ago, Cygnar was under the rule of Vinter Ralthorn IV, who was the latest in a long dynasty of rulers from the Ralthorn family. Vinter was a powerful military commander and a peerless warrior, daunting and brave. But there was also a problem. He was also a paranoid racist who hated Menites with a passion and would like to see them burn. Well, he even led inquisitions and purgings in all of Cygnar. His younger brother Leto staged a coup, which ousted him and all of his aides and what have you. while they were able to capture everyone, Julius himself, nobody could capture because, again, peerless warrior. But he still ran for the hills, got into a war balloon, and sailed off to God knows where. Now, Leto took the throne, and his brother was tried in absentia for crimes against humanity. While Leto was more of a peacemaker, he wasn't very much of a dynamic leader when it came to military affairs. He was, and people saw him as sort of like as a weakling. In modern history, Julius Rawthorn was actually the bastard son of Venter, and it's actually this entire event is chronicled in a book called Blood of Kings. I may read that one day on stream for you guys if you want to watch it. And so after realizing that he wasn't his father, Leto abdicated the throne and allowed Julius to become the new king of Signar. All right, we got the theme forces, and now, all right. First off, we got to talk about the composition, the typical composition of an army in Warmachine and Hordes. First, you had your warcaster, the commander, the one that calls all the shots. Then we have his battle group, which consists of a bunch of warjacks. You can only take so many warjacks due to the point differentials and what have you. Then you have his units, which are his basic army units. And they also have unit attachments, which can be attached to certain units. And then we have specialized units that are independent from the main units. Then we have solos, which are independent characters that can be added to your army if you have the points for it. Now, for warcasters, we got a lot of warcasters to go through. I'm just going to go with the noble ones. One that you might, that devil you might find interesting is this one. Say hello to Lieutenant Alistair Kane. Look kind of familiar, doesn't he? I mean, last name Kane, uses some magical guns, wears a trench coat. Very familiar, don't you think? But yeah, I actually based Lucas Kane off Alistair Kane. And he's basically a guy who does a lot of wet work and dirty work for the CRS, especially the commander, General Gullivan Revald. And they're actually the characters actually have different versions of themselves that get better. This is just a standard version of Kane, and this is the epic version of Kane, Captain Alistair Kane. This is him a bit more seasoned and what have you, and actually, Kane plays a major role in Julius Rawthorn's ascension to the crown. And he has an entire story to him called Hellslinger. I read it. It's fantastic. I may read it for the channel. Next, we have Captain Victoria Haley. Very vaunted warcaster. Very powerful and latent potential. She has incredible abilities. She was actually orphaned at a young age when a Crixian raider group attacked her village and killed her entire family, and she became a ward of the state. Now, she evolves twice. Next, she becomes Major Victoria Haley. And her whole thing is that she can slow down and stop time with her arcanic powers. That's how powerful she gets. But wait, there's more. We got Major Prime Victoria Haley. And you see these two on the screen, her powers over time had gotten so great that she could actually call upon two versions of herself, her young self from the past and her more powerful self from the future, to help her fight in combat. Yeah, Victoria Haley is no joke. All right. And Allison Jakes, I'm not too... Captain Jeremiah Crane, cavalry commander, badass. Then we have Major Beth Maddox, Captain Adept Sebastian Nemo, often called the smartest human in the entirety of the Iron Kingdoms. A lot of the technology that the that that Signar uses is from this guy. He's basically like their version of Dr. Vegapunk. His technology, he's the reason why they have lightning and uses electricity and shit for all this other stuff. This is his greater version, Adept General Sebastian Nemo, and this is his final version, Artifactor General Sebastian Nemo, and his assistant Storm Chaser Finch. Yeah, he has an assistant now. Next we have that's her right there. Next we have Captain Kara Sloan, Sniper. I actually fought against Sloan in a skirmish battle years ago. She takes people's lives. The most notable thing about her is that she's actually in a illicit relationship with one of her subordinates. He's not actually a character in this, so there's no model for her to take into combat. And then we have one of the most famous members of the Signarin military. We have Coleman Stryker, who was very instrumental in the Lion's coup to take down Ventur Routhorn. And of course, we have his evolved version, Lord Commander Coleman Stryker, and finally Lord General Coleman Stryker. He turns into a cavalry unit in the future. Then we have Commander Dallin Sturgis. He's relatively new. Constance Blaze. Constance Blaze is unique in that she's not actually a member of the Signarin military. She's more like a lord who happens to serve in the military. Like, she has some status within the military, but she's not an official member. So she's like a noble lady who serves in the military. And finally, we have the group Kane's Hellslingers. This is the aftermath of what happened in the book Hellslingers. Basically, the Cricks have kidnapped Kane's daughter, and so him and two other members who have left the CRS have joined him with the sole purpose of waging war on the Nightmare Empire. So his whole story was he's just going to raise an army, and he's going to literally charge into the den of evil to get his kid back. Yeah, very nice. All right, moving on to the Warjacks. Warjacks are classified into three separate categories. You have your light Warjacks, which have greater speed but lower armor. Your heavy Warjacks, which have greater armor but lower speed. And then you have your Colossals, which are just these gigantic walking battle platforms. So, of course, we have the Avenger. This is the Avenger class heavy Warjack. This is the Centurion Heavy Warjack, a Charger Light Warjack, Cyclone Light Warjack, and also there are actually and I'll go to this one. This is Ace. These are what we call personal warjacks or characterized warjacks. These are warjacks that actually have some level of characterization to them. They have distinct personalities and are often attached to specific warcasters. They actually get better battlefield benefits if they are fielded with their specific warcaster. Me? So this is Ace. Ace is the personal warjack of our boy Alistair Kane. And let me just check. Yep, he's bonded to Kane. So there's that. Next we have Brickhouse, the personal warcaster of Commander Maddox. Here's Dynamo, the personal warjack of Sebastian Nemo. Here's Nemo alongside Dynamo. And a very popular warjack up next, Old Rowdy. And he looks rowdy all right. He's the personal warjack of Coleman Stryker. This is Thorn. This is Victoria Haley's personal warjack. Yeah, Thunderhead's not a personal warjack, but he looks cool as fuck. We have the Triumph, which is bonded to Commander Siege Brisbane. And now we have our first Colossal. Say hello to the Hurricane. Big bastard, isn't he? Big. This is another warjack. This is another colossal, the Storm Wall, which actually has these little lightning pods that shoot electricity out all over the battlefield, and the lightning arcs, and it can keep arcing through infantry. I've seen people fuck up infantry with this light warjack, with this colossal. And this is a mercenary warjack called the Gallant. All right, now we're gonna go to the troops. Now, every faction has their own warjacks and their own specialized troops. For the Signarans, they have the gun mages, the Arcane Tempest gun mages. Very shooting, very shooting. This is the attachment that goes with the gun mages, the officer gun mage. These are field mechanics. Field mechanics are basically they're basically characters who can fight in combat, but their main thing is fixing up warjacks in the middle of combat. So if you're running a heavy warjack based strategy, bring some mechanics along. Keep them running ship shape. You have the fabled long gunner infantry, the infantry standard and officer, the vaunted sword knights, the sword knights officer and standard, the Tempest blazers, the Black 13th Strike Force, which is a specialized character unit. As you can see, those two look interesting. They're actually, this is the group. These were on Kane's Hellslingers. These two were actually a part. This was the group these two were a part of before they joined Kane in his crusade against the Cricks. You have the solo, a rifleman. Always good to have a solo. You have a gun mage cadet adept, a journeyman warcaster who can, in a pinch, command a warjack, but only temporarily. Squire, which is a solo. You have Lieutenant Allison Jakes, who would eventually become a warcaster in her own right. We have Archduke Alan Runewood, the Lord of Farin, who's a solo himself. And one of my personal favorite solos, Captain Arlen Strangeways. If that's not a cool ass name, I know people who just took this guy in a battle simply because of his name was awesome. Arlen Strangeways. And that's it for the main bulk of the Signaran troops. Now we're moving on to the let me go number 1. And now we're moving on to Khador. Khador is Russia. I'm not even gonna get into it. Khador is fucking Russia. Look at the design. Look at the aesthetic. They call each other comrade. They call Khador the motherland or the fatherland. It's all. This is Russia. This is Russia. And I'll just right now, I know the most about this particular faction because. Yeah, you certainly should do this. You should do this more. You definitely should look it up more. Let's see. Let's see. Khador is basically Russia. I played this. This was the faction I played in my when I was playing Warmachine. This is the faction I know the most about. This is just straight up Russia. Yeah. All right, and this is Russia. This is the entirety of Russia. I mean, this is the entirety of Khador. Now, this is the military. Up to recently, they didn't have an empress. She named herself Empress. Empress Anya Vanar. And she is aided by the royal court, which includes her prince consort, the great princes, and the vassals and liegemen, and the minister of the great vizier. The ministry actually commands the Grey Lord Covenant, which is more like the high wizarding rules of Khador. And ruling over them of the military is the Khadoran High Command with a K. And this is some recent stuff that I'll get into later on. There are 3 armies that make. Khador is made up of 3 armies: the Anvil, the Hammer, and the Forge. Khador has a navy. They have an army of great princes who are the minor nobilities of the Khadoran Empire, and several others. So, okay, let's get to the Warcasters. And like I said, I played most of these, so I know the most about these bastards. First up, we have Commander Harkovich, the Iron Wolf. Beard son of a bitch. Let me reduce this a little bit so you can see. Harkovich. Didn't play him, but he was a beast. Look at that beard. That beard is amazing. And now we have a guy I played in both versions. Commandant Gulavant Irisk. Now, Irisk, he is without a doubt the Napoleon of Warmachine and Hordes. He is, when you think of battle tactics in Warmachine, you think of Irisk. This is a guy who lives for tactical supremacy. His father was a member of the Winter Guard. He lived and breathed tactics. He rose to the rank through sheer tactical acumen alone. He is fantastic. I've played both versions of him, and he is one of my favorite characters. Hell, he wrote the book on warfare. He has a book out called Irisk on Warfare: How to Subjugate Your Enemy. It is not only required reading in Russian military academies, but required reading in every major military academy in all of Emeryn. You don't have to, people who don't even like Khador have nothing but respect for this guy. He is brilliant. Tactician plus. And the Empress treats him like crap. Of course, we have his second version, the Supreme Commandant, Gulavant Irisk, the one who conquered Lael. Yeah, forgot to mention, Khador actually conquered Lael and reincorporated it into the Khadoran Empire, and the one that made it, who led that invasion, was Irisk. So yeah. Next, we have perhaps the most unique of any warcaster in, not just in Khador, but in all of Emeryn. Alexander Karchev, aka Karchev the Terrible. And I'm just going to show his picture, and you'll see why. That is Karchev the Terrible. He is the closest thing you will see in Warmachine to a cyborg. Now, there are people who have mechanical prosthetic legs and arms, but Karchev, he is just a torso in a warjack body customized to let him control it. Karchev's whole thing is that he loves the motherland. He loves Khador. He has served it for more than 100 years. Yes, you heard me, 100 years. And when he was wounded in combat and lost the use of his arms and legs, he showed the Khadoran assembly that he could still fight. And he just needed a body and mobility. He even was able to command warjacks with unbelievable power and precision. So the Mechanics Assembly, the leading scientific firm of Khador, created him that body from a juggernaut chassis so that he could move. And when the prime thing with Karchev is the motherfucker will not die. I mean it. Like, he has survived. He should not be alive right now. He is well over 100 years old. He has seen some of the gnarliest, most brutal combat that one could see in all of Western Emeryn. And he just won't die. No one knows why. In the earlier lore, he was actually captured by the Krix. And even they, the masters of life and death itself, could not understand why he just won't die. He doesn't have some kind of Wolverine healing factor or anything. He's not mystical in any sort of way beyond being a warcaster. He is just hella tough. He just won't die. As long as there is enemies of the Empire, he'll keep on living. And he'll keep on fighting. That's why they call him Karchev the Terrible, because you fight Karchev, you're in for a fight. Straight up. Let's see. Lord Kozlov, Viscount of Skarsgård. I'm not too familiar with him. He came out after I finished playing the game. Marakov. Can't say too much about him. Now we have another unique warcaster here. The Old Witch of Khador and Scrapjack. Now, before I say anything, the one thing you should note about Khador is that they don't have light warjacks. They don't have the you see, making warjacks requires you to make cortexes for them. And the Khadorans don't know how to make smaller sized cortexes, so they can only make heavy warjacks. And the Old Witch is the only character in the entirety of Khador that has access to a light warjack, Scrapjack. That's because she is a powerful-ass witch. Zavanna Aga is her name. Her origins are mysterious. She is just old. Like, she was around well before the Orgoth came, before the Thousand Cities era, before the Kardic Empire. There were just legends of this old crone floating around up north. There's even a saying amongst the Khadorans that when Menoth was walking Cain during the earliest days of prehistory and mankind didn't exist, he walked into a cave and he found the Old Witch waiting for him. The Old Witch is not an official member of the Khadoran military, but she holds enough power and influence that she can easily just summon, easily be requisitioned to military forces for whatever her purposes is. She is powerful. She can rip you apart and skin you if you want. She can teleport, summon murders of crows. She is power unlike anything you will ever see. This old biddy will cut you. All right. Next up, we have Commander Sorsha Kardakov. Beautiful, isn't she? Sorsha, her father was a member of the Khadoran military in the vaunted Winter Guard until he was killed in an incident at Kardov. I'll get to that in a bit. She began to manifest her. She joined the Khadoran military, the Winter Guard, and then she began to manifest her Warcaster talent, mostly manifesting as ice. Because of her beauty and her talent, many men wanted her, and she just did not like the political side of the Khadoran military. So she was sent to train with a prince, Vladimir Tepesh, and she found him very handsome, and she fell in love with him. Yep, she fell in love with the guy, and once you see him, you'll see why she fell in love with him. Yeah, her whole thing is that she freezes shit. She freezes shit. This is her epic version, Forward Commander Sorsha Kardakov. Next we have Commander Oleg Strakov, the commander of the vaunted Strike Commandos. This guy, if you need a job done, no matter how impossible or how dirty, he'll do it. Basically, Strakov is the reason why the invasion of Lael went so well, because he and his Strike Commandos sabotaged a lot of embankments that would have impeded Iris's advance into the country. There were other reasons why Lael fell. I'll get to that later. Strakov, hardcore dude. I like him. This is his epic version, Assault Commander Strakov and his Commandos with a K. Next, we have the guy, Vladimir Sepeshi, the Dark Prince. Yep, that's Sorsha's boo. Look at him. Look at him. He looks like Vamp from Metal Gear Solid, or a black-haired version of Dracula from Castlevania. But anyway, Vlad here is the Prince of the Fiefdom of Umbrae. And there is actually a legend involved with him that says if something were to happen to him, then a dark fate would befall the motherland. And that's why he's known as the Dark Prince. He's actually very chill and very proud of his heritage. Unlike other nobles, he relishes combat and loves getting his hands dirty. And of course, he fell deeply in love with Sorsha. Of course, and this is his epic version, the Dark Champion. This is after he nearly died by some Krix invaders, and the Old Witch nursed him back to health and turned him into a champion that would fight against the undead hordes of the Krix. And this is his Great Prince of Umbrae cavalry version. Now, mentioned earlier in the video, there was some uproar, there were some changes in the military, and you maybe saw him holding hands with Anya Venara. That's because pre-Oblivion, she selected him to be her husband, and you kind of understand why it's just iffy, because he's still very much in love with Sorsha, so he would be in sort of a loveless marriage, but he couldn't tell anybody that. So there's that. Next we have Kolden Commander Alexandra Zekonova. She basically looks up witch shit. She is a sorceress of unparalleled might and power. This is her Openik commander, Zivana, and her Reaver guard. She has Reavers to guard her. I'll get to what those are in a minute. And finally, we have the most infamous, the most hated, the most feared, and the most balls-to-the-wall warcaster, not just in Khador, but in the entire fucking game. And I played with this guy. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Orsis Zuktarvir, the Butcher of Kardov. Now, the story of the Butcher is both balls-to-the-wall insane and very depressing. Zuktarvi stands about 7 feet straight up, 300 pounds, just a mountain of a man. He just showed up at the military academy at Kursk. He wanted to serve, and the only things he had with him was some steam jacks that he was controlling and his giant fuck-off battle axe that he named after his dearly departed wife, Lola. Now, the reason why this guy is so hated is because that incident I mentioned in Kardov. So the story goes, a section of Khador wanted to secede from the Empire to rejoin Lael. A small contingent of Winter Guardsmen, including Zuktarvi, were sent there to try to mediate the situation. There was talks came to a head between both sides, and somehow, someway, Zuktarvi just lost his shit. He couldn't stand the sight of these traitors, and with one swing of his axe, he cleaved the leader of the secessioners in two. Then he cleaved the man next to him, and then the man next to him. Then one of his fellow Winter Guardsmen, Sorsha's father, tried to calm him down, saying that's too much, and in his frenzy, he killed him too. And then it became an absolute massacre. He just started killing people. He was in a homicidal rage, swinging Lola left and right, turning anyone who got hit by him into mists of gore. Story goes that when it was all said and done, there was so much blood in the streets of Kardov that night that the rats had to jump from corpse to corpse to keep from drowning. When it was all told, more than 70 people on both sides had been utterly massacred, butchered by Orsis Zuktarvi, thus earning him his nickname, the Butcher of Kardov. He was immediately arrested, and he was to be taken back to Kardov, the capital of Khador. He would be taken in front of the Empress herself. Now, a man is massacring 70 some odd people out of sheer homicidal rage. That would have got him locked up. It would have got him executed. But he's told the Empress that he was just doing what a good Royal Winter Guardsman would do. And the Empress said, I buy it. So not only did the Empress give him a pardon and absolve him of all his crimes, she promoted him to forward commander Orsis Zuktarvi. And this does not sit well with a lot of people, because the reason she did this was because Zuktarvi was a weapon. He was something that she could use to keep the hawks in the military in line so they wouldn't bother her very much. So if you are disloyal to her, you would send the Butcher after you. Needless to say, a lot of people in the Khadoran military and were not happy with this. Least of all Sorsha, who openly hates this guy for murdering her father. He is useful in the way that he's just a blunt instrument. He's a weapon. He is a madman. And playing him, he is nuts. Like Lola, a lot of warcasters stay in the back. You play the Butcher in the front, and you dare your opponent to do something because he's tough and he hits hard. I've seen this guy cleave through entire infantry of other units. I've seen him take down full-on heavy warjacks and war beasts with a few swings of that axe of his. I saw once somebody play this guy against a fucking colossal, and in one turn, he crippled it with just one string of attacks. He crippled a fucking colossal with a broadaxe. Think about that. That's brutal. But yeah, and he does get another one, Commander Siktarvi, the Butcher Unleashed, that gives him some war dogs to fight. But overall, he does not have friends. No one likes him. He does have two people who could be considered friends, who we'll get to in a few minutes. But overall, by the end of the story in Pre-Oblivion, he is less of a man and just more of a ravenous, bloodthirsty dog who will just kill whoever the Empress says he will kill. Because that's all he knows anymore. That's sad. All right, now we got warjacks. Like I said, Khador doesn't have light warjacks, but they have something that compensates for that. And there's a saying about Khadoran warjacks: easy to hit, hard to hurt. That should tell you how tough they are. All right, this is the standard Berserker. I had this. Then you have your Decimator, one of the few ways that could accurately use projectile weaponry for a warjack. You have your Demolisher. You have your Destroyer. I had one of these. A Devastator, which was really hard to hurt. A Grolar, relatively new. This is I had one of these. The Juggernaut class, which is the same type of warjack frame that Karchev uses. A Kodiak class. A Mad Dog, which is relatively new. The Marauder. We have the Rager, which uses a sword, and a Buster Shield. Spriggan. I had a Spriggan. Spriggans are great. And finally, we get to the character warjacks. First, we have Sorsha's personal warjack, the Beast 09, who is fanatically loyal to Sorsha and uses a giant frost axe to freeze people to death. Perfect for the Ice Queen. Next, we have the Behemoth. Not a character warjack, but it was the closest that Khador had to a Colossal for a long time. It was their biggest warjack that wasn't a Colossal. We have Black Ivan, which belonged to the Iron Wolf. We have Drago, which belongs to Vladimir. Yes, Drago. That Drago. We have Ruin, which is of course the Butcher's personal warjack. This thing is insane. Like, it might literally be the only insane, like mentally insane warjack in the entire fleet. Period. Next we have the Torch, which belongs to Strakov. Burns shit. Now we have Khador's Colossal, the Conquest. Look at that shit. Look at that shit. Look how big that is. See, look at this. These are Spriggans. Spriggans are huge. This is a Conquest. This thing's massive. I didn't have a Colossal. I quit the game before it was over, but it's one of the best Colossals in the game. Freaking massive. Next we have the Victor, the second generation Colossal. Big bastard. And now we have the troops. Now, I mentioned before, the Winter Guard are the rank and file members of the are the military arm of the Khadoran military. It is a forced conscription army where the where everyone has to serve in the Winter Guard, regardless of who you are, male or female, doesn't matter. Everyone serves in the Winter Guard, but you can only serve it for 5 years. After 5 years, you can go back to whatever you were doing. But there are many who just who stay in the Winter Guard. Who stay in the Winter Guard because they like serving their country. Although they don't get much in the way of career advancement due to the fact that that you need sponsorship or noble standing to get anywhere in the military. And of course, here we have the various ranks in the Khadoran military. We have Corporal, Sergeant, Lieutenant, Captain, Kovnik, Commander, Commandant, Supreme Commandant, and Premier. All right, we have We have the Khadoran battle mechanics, same as the regular mechanics. Now we have battle mechanic. Yeah, he's in a suit of armor. There's a reason for that. We have the vaunted Black Dragoons, who are part of the elite Iron Fang pikemen, Iron Dragoon and officer, and we have the Iron Fang pikemen. Now the Iron Fangs are basically just guys in power armor. They're the Iron Fangs and the Man of Wars are the Khadora's answer to light warjacks in the world of Warmachine. These guys are nasty work. They can take down a lot of shit with those blasting pikes. Here's their attachment, the officer and the standard. We have the Iron Fang Uhans, which are basically Iron Fangs on horseback. Kassite Woodsmen. These guys fight in the woods with axes and shit. Nice. You have your Widowmakers. The Widowmakers are the vaunted sniper unit of the Khadoran Widowmakers. They call them Widowmakers because when they shoot, they make widows. First, we have our Iron Fang character unit, the Great Bears of Gallows Wood. I had these guys. Basically, they're 3 Iron Fangs who held the line against a Signaran assault and took on an entire army by themselves. So they earned the name the Great Bears. They are a mean group. Now we have the Grey Lords, who are the version of wizards that the Winter Guard the Winter Guard have. They make up the Grey Lords. This is an Iron Fang Kovnik, these were the same class as the Great Bears. This is the group that the Great Bears came from. They are called Iron Fangs Kovniks. We have Manhunters, 2 axes. War Dog. You cannot take a. You have to have a pupper. You can't be a Khador and go into battle without having a pupper. Need a pupper. You have the Winter Guard's Marksman, which is the Widowmaker Marksman, which is like the Widowmaker but better. And now we have some solos. Kovnik Andrei Malikov before he became a warcaster. We have Kovnik Marikov, the vaunted cavalry commander of the Iron Fang Ulahans. We have Yuri the Axe, a Kassite woodsman who was also a murderer of sorts. He is one of the few people that he has often been seen in the company of the Butcher. He's the closest thing that the Butcher has to a friend, and that's saying something. You have your Kiazi Assassins, who are basically acrobats who stab folks. Your Kiazi Assassin Underboss, which is their attachment. Your Kiazi Eliminators, which are acrobatic swordsmen who kill you. And we're missing a few. I think I'll save those for later. Wait a minute, I'm not gonna save those for later. I want you guys to get the whole Khadoran experience. So, all right, there are a few that we're missing. So we're just gonna skip right to them. Okay, we got the Assault Commandos here, which are Strakov's unit. Flamethrower Assault Commandos. Of course, battle mechanics, the Grey Lord's Tarion. And there we have Doom Reavers. Now, I meant this is what I meant. This is the Orgoth weapon known as the Fellblade, and this is a nasty bit of work. Like I said, pick one up, you turn into a homicidal berserker. The Khadorans saw this and said, let's turn them into units. So they made convicted criminals, chained them to the Fellblades, and turned them into homicidal killing machines. And the Grey Lords are the only ones who can control them. Well, not the only ones. These are the Grey Lord escorts, the ones who can control the Doom Reavers. Because if you don't have a Doom Reaver, someone to control the Doom Reavers, they can kill your infantry just as easily as they can kill the others. You see Iron Fang Pikemen, the Standards, the Ulahans. We already saw the Cossite Woman, the Chaosy Assassins. Here are the Manowar units. The Manowar Bombardiers. The Manowar Demo Corps. I had these. Manowar Shock Troopers. Widowmakers. The Widow Guard, the Winter Guard Infantry. These are just the bog standard guys. The focus of a strategy that we've collectively called the Winter Guard Death Star. Winter Guard Officer and Standard. Winter Guard Rocketeer. Winter Guard Field Gun Crew. Winter Guard Mortar Crew. And Winter Guard Rifle Corps. The Winter Guard are perhaps one of the best infantries in the entire game. There's just so much you can do with them, and if you field these guys with Iris, your phone, it might as well just hang it up. Might as well hang it up. All right. Already mentioned the Great Bears of Gallowswood, Coden Lord, Manhunter, the Drukan, the Kovnik, Pupper, Woodsman, and now we meet the guy who is also the other guy who can say that he might be friends with the Butcher. I present to you Fenris. Fenris is a Doom Reaver, but for some reason, he's sort of an aberrant of a Doom Reaver. He can use 2 Fell Blades at the same time, and he is frightening. Just look at that shit. Just, let's zoom in on him. Just look at Fenris. Like, look at this shit. He doesn't even look human. Just all muscle and shit. Yeah, Fenris is a nightmare. Hell, look. Here's the blurb about him. He is a living nightmare. Send him far away from the children of the motherland to haunt our enemies, where he can trouble our people no more. And he actually has some level of control over the Doom Reavers. He can control them to a point, even though that control is iffy. And you can't even call what he's riding a horse, because it's just a thing that looks like a horse. And just to give up the creep factor a bit more, this thing eats dead people nearly exclusively. Yeah, Fenris is scary. Next we have Josef Grukovic, otherwise known as Coconut Joe. He is a career Winter Guardsman who basically is another reason why the Winter Guard are so damn dangerous, because he has this thing where he gives these heroic speeches that give the Winter Guard extra defense or extra attack. Like, you had a lot of options when it came to the Winter Guard. You could play pure Winter Guard if you want to, and you could fuck shit up. I did. And Coconut Joe is instrumental to that. Of course, we have Marigov and, of course, Yuri the Axe, and that's about it. And I think it's about time for us to wrap this one up. My voice is really feeling it, so I'm just gonna have to wrap it up for here, but we'll definitely get back to this. We got a lot more to talk about when it comes to Warmachine and Hordes. I'm not even done with the Warmachine side with all the factions yet. We still got the Cricks to talk about. We got the Protector to talk about. We got to talk about the Mercs. We also got to talk about the Retribution. We got to talk about the Rule Folk, a lot of stuff, and then we got to go over to the Horde side. So that's just a lot of stuff to talk about. So thank everybody for coming out and listening. And Devil, I hope you really look into this. If you need some help on some resources, I got nearly all the books for it. If you want to just thumb through it and just read through it and see what's going and see what's the big deal with it, I got nearly all the faction books. And yeah, it definitely needs more discussing. So hopefully next time we'll just talk about it more, and hopefully sometime in the future I'll actually read one of the books. I got a couple of the books. Some of them are short stories, others just talk about other stuff. I got the Cain books, The Way of Cain and Hellslinger, and I got Blood of Kings and a few others. And just wait. Also, and just something to look forward to. There are pirates in this show. There's pirates in this game. In fact, I'm gonna give you a nice little teaser. Let's see, where are you? Mercs. No. Ah. Yep. pirates, like full-on fucking pirates. And this is a guy I wanted to play, Phineas Shea. You can tell who I based it, what character I was inspired by this guy, Phineas Shea. But yeah, that's more. That's just a taste of what's to come. So I'm glad you enjoyed it, Devil. I'm glad that you had fun listening to this. Like I said, if you need any thing to watch, or if you need anything to read, just let me know. Like I said, I got all the books, I got all the stuff you want to read, and hopefully next time we'll get through more of it, because there's a lot. Like I said, there's a lot to chew through with this, and there's a lot of great stuff in here. So I want to thank everybody who came out tonight for me talking about Warmachine and Hordes. If you are interested in this game, just go look it up. Privateer Press. They're very nice. They're not total ass munches like Games Workshop. They're actually very, very cool and very, very chill. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. So we'll see you next Tuesday as we'll look into more Warmachine lore and stuff. So until then, this has been Shintigercurl, that dude in the straw hat, saying good night. And insert witty end of stream here.